Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the CTO Club podcast with me, Sam Baker. And today we'll be diving into the topic of scaling companies and guiding them through successful acquisitions with Bohdan Zabawskyj. As a seasoned CTO, Bohdan has led several companies to acquisition by major players such as NASDAQ and Salesforce. And he's also the founder of TrueNorth CTO, a Canadian-based non-for-profit community for technology leaders with over 2,500 members. So first of all, I'm going to take a moment and pass over to Bohdan to introduce himself.
Thank you for that, Sam. So if I was a character myself, I would describe myself fundamentally as an operator. So 3.5 decades in operations in a variety of domains, 2.5 decades as a senior technology leader. Now, one thing which I think is a bit unique, or at least to me, is I've alternated between the CTO function, aka the classic VP engineering function, and the chief product officer function. Leading product enhancements and product market fit. The other unique thing, if I reflect back, last 2.5 decades, is I have not been partnered with a CEO, largely because if I'm responsible for product operations, engineering operations, I found typically the CEO function tends to evolve to more of a chief of staff role. So one unique thing about my career trajectory is, in addition to technology product, I've also been deeply immersed in the unit economics and unit efficiencies of operating an effective company.
Awesome. And as I said in the introduction, you've obviously been in positions where you have been a technical leader in companies that have scaled quite rapidly and ended up with successful acquisitions. Could you provide a couple of examples of those and maybe talk through how those acquisitions took place?
Oh, fair enough. So I've been again, something which is a bit unique. I've been, I would say, fortunate to have participated in a number of high growth ventures, which have been typically had some exit. First material one would be Redknee, now Optiva, which IPO'd in 2007. That was in the telecom OSS BSS domain. One unique aspect of Redknee is it was effectively bootstrapped all the way to IPO. So no VC funding, no private equity funding. So it forced us to be very lean and efficient and be very aware of unit economics while achieving product market fit. From there, I went to FuseNet, which is a consortium company focused in the media domain. The flagship property, audiobooks.com, was acquired by RB Media. From there, I went into Ripple, which was an HR tech play focused on social performance optimization. That was acquired by Salesforce.com, as you noted, and evolved into Work.com within the Salesforce.com portfolio. From there, I went into hardware to enterprise SaaS transformation plan called Mercatus, which was approximately 5 years of my career. In between that and my next role, I started a company with my partner in HR tech domain focused on value and belief alignment for incoming candidates. That still exists today, and that's led by my partner. Last two coming up would be Quando, which would be a fintech play, which was acquired by NASDAQ. And finally, Aeronautics, a global HR tech play focused primarily on governance, risk, and compliance and rostering, headquartered primarily in Chicago, but has global operations in well over 20 countries.
Awesome. Thank you for that background. And then I guess moving into a couple of questions around, how you got to those situations. I think obviously you mentioned your first company was quite lean in terms of the way that you worked, but others, may have been slightly different. What are, would you say, some of the key technological challenges you faced when scaling the company and getting to that point where they could be potentially acquired?
Well, excellent question. So I'll circle back to the technology option, and I'll maybe push back on a theme. One thing I've noticed as a technology operator and product leader is my points of leverage, perhaps beyond a certain scale, beyond, I would say, typically the seed stage scale, and I guess VC terminology would be, the points of leverage were typically people, process, and then technology in that order. Now, as a technologist, that may seem a bit odd, but what I find was typically you're great at points of um, growth and leverage in terms of focusing on points of friction, focus on people and process. Now, circling back to technology, effectively, it's always a tension between new product delivery, new feature delivery, and observing the reality of operational and technology debt. I believe technology debt, as it's commonly referred to, has a bit of a negative connotation, but the reality is every company has technical and operational debt. Even if you point towards the ideal use case of a startup focusing on an assumed product market fit venture. As soon as it hits the market, the realities of the market, get feedback from either the consumers or clients, as the case may be, basically discrepancies between what was assumed about the market and the reality of the product in its present form is what's typically referred to operational or technology debt. So effectively, what you have to do is you have to prioritize and achieve alignment with the stakeholders of the organization. Obviously, CEO, CRO, CFO, because whether or not there's always people and capital constraints. So if you prioritize the tension between new product delivery and contemplating and resolving opportunities around technical and operational debt, that's where you achieve optimal growth and velocity.
Okay, cool. And then I guess probably leads into my next question in terms of what role do you think the actual technology plays in making a company more attractive to potential buyers, obviously moving towards that acquisition phase?
Okay. Having been on both sides of the equation, I would say, and dealing with well over 20 transactions, as which I've personally been involved with, I would say the overwhelming majority of their transactions tend to be product extension or cross-sell plays. That is, a company is acquired, and for the purpose of a time to market advantage or cross-sell advantage with regards to selling the product and or technology to a wider consumer or client base. For example, that was primarily the motivation between Salesforce's acquisition of Ripple, which turned into Work.com. That was also the motivation between Nasdaq's acquisition of Quandl, that they could cross-sell, given a much more extensive brand and market presence, and obviously potential geographic and market base. So effectively, the primary motivation, based on my experience, is product extensions, time to market advantage. Having said that, there is that possibility that a company will have defensible and unique intellectual property. Ideally, it's protected. It can be protected via trade secrets, but ideally, it's protected via some form of trademark patent protection. It's a longer term game. There is cost involved, but I believe, if I reflect back, that was probably one of the contributing factors towards Rennie's success in a heavily litigious environment where we were competing with large telecom international operators with like so Siemens, Huawei, and Nortel back in the day. Um, we didn't focus extensively on IP protection, but we developed a material IP portfolio, which gave us the yellow and black stripes as something that could sting back or fight back if required. So it gave us a partial shield, which allows us to grow in that litigious environment.
Okay, cool. And appreciate the companies that you've worked for, differ in, the size and scale and also industry to an extent. When you are kind of going through that scaling phase, can you talk us through how you evaluate whether to build the technology in-house or versus acquiring or kind of partnering for certain capabilities that maybe, would advance you in another way?
This may appear odd because I'm fundamentally a technologist. Also, I'm a named inventor in over 20 patent portfolios. But I typically have my propensity is not to reinvent the wheel if possible. So if is an existing open source library or existing product which can be quickly incorporated and provides the functionality and utility that's required for the product or platform as required, then I would tend to favor, if possible, some sort of licensing arrangement or incorporation of the applicable library. Now, two factors which preclude that are unit economics. So if the licensing terms are onerous or financially unviable, then obviously that's a case in point where you may develop your own technology or your own feature to compensate for that. The other thing is sometimes the technology simply does not exist. And I'll point to one specific use case. So Redney, when it began, we were primarily leveraging Oracle database, relational database technology. It made sense because we're dealing with large telecom operators, leveraging a well-established brand in relational database like Oracle made sense. And it made sense in terms of our unit economics, which initially focused on emerging operators in Europe and North America and the Caribbean. However, as we attempted to scale our technology or extend our platform to the Asia Pacific region, what we found was the unit economics simply did not work. In that case, the anticipated sale price of the platform was much lower by virtue of the macroeconomic factors in that area, and the transactional rate. And we were intermediating real-time events and voice messaging and data, literally every event in a telecom environment, caused the transaction count to go from hundreds of transactions per second to literally thousands of transactions per second. So in that case, the unit economics of Oracle forced us into effectively a deficient or negative zone. We actually had to develop, and we looked at various open source technologies like MySQL. Again, yes, that was more cost effective from a licensing perspective, but the hardware required to support less efficient database, relational database, again, blew the unit economics out the window. So what we had to do, in that case, we developed our own proprietary in-memory real-time data store, which we codenamed RedStore. And it worked. It allows us to expand into the Asia Pacific region, effectively form the baseline, which allowed us to eventually IPO on the TSX. So that's one case where we legitimately tried to leverage existing technologies, but when the unit economics and technology did not exist, we actually went ahead and developed our own proprietary, now patented technology.
Okay, so it's sometimes a bit of a needs must situation depending on the company and what you're kind of looking to do. That makes sense. And then I guess this question is more aimed at, I guess, the scalability of a company and how you as a CTO would maintain innovation and agility in your tech teams as the company grows in terms of headcount and matures as a business.
Interesting question. I believe that's one of the fundamental aspects of a technology leader. If I point towards things that I found, one is avoiding hubris. I found this particularly in emerging leaders. There's a propensity, because there's been some modicum of success, they start believing that everything that they're doing or the past informs the future, which can be a bit of a mistake. So effectively, you need, I hate to use, maybe the word paranoia is a bit too strong, but healthy skepticism for your achievements of the past. You always have to be revisiting as to, do you have the best people? Do you have the best processes? Do you have the best technologies in order to support your current organization's growth and expansion and continue evolution of product market fit? So this involves basically challenging the status quo. Does a process make sense? Can we make things faster, cheaper, better? What I found is perfection is rare, but things can always be made better.
Okay, cool. And I appreciate the kind of title CTO can be wide ranging now in terms of responsibility, and obviously that depends on scale usually in the kind of responsibilities that entails. But in terms of a company or a CTO going through a stage of rapid growth or moving towards an acquisition phase, what would you kind of consider as an essential traits or essential traits that they may need to have to be successful?
Well, I'm going to go back to, I guess, my philosophical construct of the function of a leader, and ironically, a technology leader, is to focus and I'll extend. So the three primary pillars that I have is people, process, and technology. So beyond a certain stage, typically seed stage or a team size of 10, in an engineering field. You have to always be challenging wherever you have the right people on deck. And if you have the right people on deck, it's that focus on coaching and mentoring to bring them to the next level of the performance and remit within an organization. The other thing is processes. The processes when you have a team of 5 is very different when you have a team of 50. It's different when you have a team of 500. So always challenging the status quo. Because when you think about it, processes are vitally important to an organization, but they ironically preclude thought. You can have an input vector, you achieve something, do some work, and get exit value, presumably more value within the organization or to the consumer. So I find not focusing or revisiting processes, given all the things that can happen with the growth of a company, including growth of an organization, new people, acquisitions, macroeconomic factors, new domains, new customers. All of that has to be focused on, are we really optimizing the processes, particularly within functional silos, in an ideal manner. The other thing is understanding your own technology operational limitations. And that gets back to the question of technology and operational debt. And are we leveraging the technology and our platform to the optimal manner to either improve product market fit or improve operational efficiencies, given the growth and evolution of the company within the existing geographic base or extending it to other geographic bases. Now, of the other two soft skills, um, is it as a technology leader, you have to be fundamentally aware of unit economics. So if you're achieving, if you're selling a license for $1,000 to a set of users or subscribers, how does it translate into, for lack of a better term, positive unit economics for the company, positive EBITDA, ideally, particularly true as you achieve obviously public status or have some shareholders, investors, either VC or private equity back. And last but not least, soft skills. I reflected previously on coaching and mentoring, ensuring that you understand the aspirations of the people that you support on your team, to coach them and mentor them to ensure that they reach their aspirations over some point in time. And that involves a healthy degree of coaching and mentoring over that span of time. And the other aspect, of course, is communication limit, both within your team as well as with shareholders, as well as stakeholders. Now, they can include shareholders, can include other executive functions, um, sales, marketing, finance, because where the technology function or is rarely an island, you have to make sure that you're communicating what you're doing it, when you're doing it, in an effective fashion within the organization.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. And I guess moving on from that, you've obviously been a CTO in different stage companies and in where they're at in size and scale. How would you say that your responsibilities have evolved from being more of a hands-on technologist to more of a strategic leader?
Okay. I guess this now, if I reflect back to the earlier stages of my career, which now goes back well over 2 decades, I guess I came to a point of realization, and I can't remember exactly I think the team size was approximately 10 or so, but I realized the value that I could bring to the team and to the organization was less about being, quote, hands-on, aka coding, or being hyper tactical, um, and more about what can I do to ensure that the people that I support have the tools, processes, and environment that makes them efficient and productive. And that includes everything from providing direction, alignment, communication with transparent communication with other stakeholders within the organization. So, in a nutshell, I found myself uh, in terms of the people side, my job was not to be the best coder, the best product manager, the best architect. My job was to find people that were ironically much better than me, so I could focus on the strategic and operational alignment within the organization, and of course, all in service of maximizing shareholder value and achieving product market fit.
Okay, cool. And obviously, having been through this acquisition phase, many times in your career now, what advice would you give to, CTOs or tech executives on building a strong engineering culture that can kind of withstand the pressures of an acquisition? Because I appreciate that it's not always positive in terms of, headcount when people, get acquired. Sometimes there's changes, but obviously that can be withstood if there's a good culture and a good plan in place. So would you have any advice on that side of things?
Um, I guess the key fundamental criteria is to be pragmatic and understand the why behind the acquisition. The reality, particularly if you're of a smaller entity being absorbed by a much larger entity, the reality is there will be a new and or additional stakeholders. So if you're beholden, for, I guess a classic case would be, Oracle being acquired by Salesforce or Quantum being acquired by NASDAQ. The reality is you have to understand the why of the acquisition. If it's more of a product extension play, then chances are they're going to be obviously, it's all about knowledge transfer and making sure that the other stakeholders of the organization understand the value of the technology and the operational forbearance that is brought to bear within the greater entity. So it's a lot of the things that I mentioned earlier with regards to communication alignment, and sometimes you have to be pragmatic about your own career, which is why I've had 6 or 7 companies in the last, I guess, or roughly 2.5 decades. Sometimes you have to be pragmatic about your own career and trajectory within the company. The reality is, some people, on the other side, where I've acquired companies and brought them into a greater whole, which is typically in the case of Aerodatics. During my tenure, we did 10 acquisitions, which were absorbed within the greater body of Aerodatics. On the inverse side, if you're the acquirer, you have to be pragmatic and transparent with regards to what's going to happen within the technology and operational team that are being absorbed within a greater company. And step one is to understand the aspirations of the leaders in that organization. Some people, frankly, would prefer a smaller, earlier stage venture, so they naturally self-select out. But sometimes, and this has happened where I've absorbed people and they become executives within the organization in their own right. So part of it is recognizing their aspirations, understanding the skill sets, understanding the knowledge that is brought into the company, and obviously maximizing and leveraging that individual or that team's capability for the benefit of the organization.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think leading on from that answer, I was wondering if there's any kind of mistakes you've seen or maybe experienced during acquisitions that maybe you've been part of from both sides, that you can maybe mention as an example, and if so, how can they be avoided in general?
Typically, if there's been a point of friction, it's been to uh, insufficient due diligence. And again, the 3 pillars focusing on people, which are important, the processes are involved, and at least understanding how it could be absorbed, transforms, or in some cases, there's nothing wrong with incorporating the processes if they're more novel or more efficient. And last but not least, the technology, understanding not only the technology, the architecture, the code base, but understanding what you're inheriting in terms of operational and technology debt. And frankly, once you have that knowledge, if you don't act on it or understand it or address it, that's typically where the pitfalls can lie. For example, if you're a smaller entity that's been serving a group of clients within a geographic-based state of America, and now your product is being expanded globally, there may be technological limitations within transactional rate and operational efficiency that requires a great deal of refactoring. So understanding literally the nuances of what you're inheriting are critically important.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that insight. And then finally, as I mentioned at the start, you're also now the founder of TrueNorth CTO, which is a community for technology executive based in Canada. I wanted to see if you wanted to touch on that a little bit more, explain what you do and what you've kind of set up and the community that you've kind of built there.
Sure. So I organized two nonprofit organizations, a regional meetup in Toronto called the Toronto CTO Meetup. And that in turn was formed by my first CTO, CPO experience within Rennie, and where I found it oddly difficult to get tactical or strategic information into what worked, what didn't work. So I formed initially the Toronto CTO Meetup to address what I thought was an unmet need within, particularly within the Canadian technology ecosystem. And a bit later on, which is 9 years ago, I realized that our problems were 24/7, and I formed this virtual asynchronous community based on Slack called TrueNorth CTO. I guess one of the things I've learned, and the original impetus was to provide this community where people could exchange insights and share problems and get real-time feedback as to how things could be improved within their personal trajectory or within their organizational remit. But it's growing with literally zero funding and as a purely grassroots community to over 2,500 people, primarily in Canada, but we have some Canadian expats that are part of the Canadian TrueNorth CTO ecosystem as well. Now, one thing I found more recently as it has expanded is even for me with 35 years of operational experience, I see it as a form of continual education just by monitoring the thread. So it's very rare that a day or week goes by that I don't learn something just by monitoring the exchange between people on a platform, which is gratifying.
Awesome. And from the community that you set up, so that you guys talk about, job vacancies, recruiting, various different kind of meetups that you have around different technologies and things like that, don't you?
It runs the gamut. We discuss obviously technology comes into play. We discuss how do you solve problems, or things that have surfaced in a given context. We talk obviously about people in terms of hiring and organizational evolution processes. So literally the three pillars do come up. The one thing I find gratifying with that ecosystem of 2,500 people, irrespective of the question, and some of them can be extraordinarily arcane, it's very rare that people don't provide constructive, professional, and wholesome input or response to that original query.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an awesome initiative that you've started, and it seems to you've gained a huge amount of traction, and sounds like it helps a huge amount of people as well. And as you said, you're learning, still from it. So, it's really interesting that you can kind of lean on that as a pillar of information, but also, really building that community out where you guys can rely on each other for advice on, pretty much everything from executive level and issues that you may see. So, kudos to you for that. And that brings us to the end. So thank you for your time. It was a really, really interesting conversation and really good to get a bit of an understanding of your background and how you've been a part of building these companies and going through their acquisitions. So thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, sir.